Oh my gosh. When I tell you this is the best salsa that I have ever eaten, I am not exaggerating. We love salsa, and we have been having somewhat of a regular nacho night that has become a little bit of a tradition around here. We go through so much salsa that I knew when I started my garden, we needed to have a salsa garden. I grew teeny tiny little pepper and tomato plants from seed, and I babied them until they were ready to transplant into the garden. All of that love and hard work paid off, and we were left with boxes and boxes of tomatoes. Now, I did also grow onions from seed, and I planted over 100 of them, but unfortunately the magpies got to them. So next year I will have to be on the lookout for that and find a solution. I did get a few onions, so I was able to use those in this recipe anyways. I noticed that one of the varieties of tomatoes that I grew this year were very prone to cracking and had these weird brown bits all over them. So I ended up harvesting them a little earlier than I maybe should have. But it worked really well, as every time the tomatoes started to get ripe, I just went in and threw them into a gallon Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer. This made peeling them so easy. This is definitely a hack. Okay, I've kept you in a deep suspense long enough, so let's get into the actual recipe. Depending on the size of your canning jar, I would definitely say get this started before you start this recipe because it can take forever. Now, as I mentioned before, if you're freezing your tomatoes, let them thaw for quite some time. I would say at least a few hours before you start the recipe, but if you don't do that and pull them out in time, I just threw mine into a big sink full of warm water and it worked perfectly. If you have fresh tomatoes, then what you can do is score the bottom of them. That means putting a shallow X cut on the bottom and boil them in water for about 1 minute and then rapidly cool them in an ice bath. Again, the skin should peel right off. Super, super easy. Unfortunately, I didn't realize this until after I had already filmed this video. However, what you can do is save all of those skins and dehydrate them to then make a dehydrated tomato powder. So my next tomatoes, I will definitely be trying this hack. This recipe uses 9 cups of peeled and diced tomatoes. Put those into your saucepan. Next, you're going to chop up 2.5 cups worth of green peppers. Now, I did a little bit extra to this recipe that I think makes all of the difference. Seriously, it's the best recipe. And that is blending it with an immersion blender at the end. If you want to do this step, leave your vegetables as chunky as you want them because you're going to be blitzing them anyway. If you really like chunky salsa, then I would recommend chopping these quite small, bite size, because you will not be blitzing them down. Do the same with 2.5 cups of onion, and finally dice up 8 cloves of garlic. Cooking is one of the things where you can let your imagination run wild. Canning is not. There's a safe way to do it and a not so safe way. Make sure that you're following an approved recipe and not blindly following somebody's recipe on the internet. You can also dice up to 4 jalapenos for this recipe. You can do less, but you cannot do more. The recipe also calls for some apple cider vinegar, so add in 1/4 cup of that as well. Now you need to add 1 full can of tomato paste. Take your sauce pot and place it on the stove. You're going to be cooking it down for about 15 minutes. You still want a little bit of bite to your vegetables, but you need this really hot and cooked. Like I mentioned before, this step is totally optional, but I feel like it elevates your salsa, and that is using an immersion blender. This way, the salsa ended up so thick, but you got some of every flavor on every single bite, so I would highly recommend it. While your salsa is heating up on the stove, get your empty jars and put them into the canner to sanitize. Your lids are going to go into some hot soapy water into the sink. And after your salsa is done and your jars are fully sanitized, it's time to fill. Fill up your jars with the hot salsa, leaving 1/4 to 1/2 inch of headspace. That just means the amount of space between the top of the jar and the salsa. Wipe the rims clean with a vinegar-soaked cloth. This ensures that you're sealing correctly. Take out the hot rings, rinse them off, you do not want soap in your recipe, and then place them on top of your jars. Tighten the rings to hand tight and place your jars back into the canner. You want them all to be upright and not too crowded. This needs to come back to a rolling boil, and once it's at a rolling boil, you can can it for 10 minutes. After they're done their 10 minutes in the canner, you can move it off to the side. I put mine on some kitchen towels just on the counter, and they have to sit undisturbed for 24 to 48 hours. You want to make sure that each one of them seals completely, as in the jar's lid is indented. If any of them don't seal properly, they go straight into the fridge to be the first ones to be enjoyed. Store your cans in a cool, dark place until you're ready to be using them. I just put mine in the basement on my canning rack. Take one out whenever you're ready to enjoy, and you will not regret it. This is amazing. Let me know if you have any canning tips, tricks, advice in the comments below. I love to hear from you. Thank you so much. Bye.